Welcome to the final module of the Virtual Adolescent Literacy Foundations Training. You've had the opportunity to work your way through the Content Literacy Overview, Academic Dialogue, Writing to Learn, and Vocabulary Development modules. Now it's time to see how all of these fit together in the Planning module. If you go to your Google site and go over to the Planning tab, click on that, scroll down, you'll see this section. Here's the video you're currently watching. Here's the double entry organizer that we're going to be using as we watch this video. The double entry organizer is designed for you to get information from the video, in this case. Could be from a lecture or from a text. And we've given you some prompts to think about as you're watching as well. But more importantly, it's that right-hand side. The connections you're making to what you know about your content area instruction, work that you've already done around professional learning that you want to make connections to as you begin thinking about incorporating this into the classroom. The second document is this Minimum Daily Learning Sequence, or MDLS. The MDLS takes the research that we have identified around planning, coupled with our experiences in working with teachers to incorporate literacy into the classroom. And the goal of the MDLS is to create a coherent experience using literacy purposefully to support clear learning objectives. And those three components, coherent experience, purposeful literacy, and clear learning objectives, make up the foundation of the MDLS. That coherent experience is coupling content, making sure that we're teaching the content at the appropriate depth of knowledge, and coupling that with process so that we know the stronger standards or harder standards means students have to be thinking about content more aggressively. So we want to give them processes and structures that help them do that, that set them up for success when they're working in these with our content. That brings us to the purposeful literacy. We want to make sure that we're choosing strategies that help our students be successful with that content. We don't want to do strategies for the sake of doing strategies. We want to do strategies because they help us achieve our goal, our instructional goals. And those instructional goals, those clear learning objectives, really are where we start. I know it comes at the end of the sentence, but it's what we start with. We want to make sure that we are the content experts. We know what our students need to be successful in our classrooms. So as we look at the minimum daily learning sequence, it has 4 components to it. And it's important that we activate the lesson, we access prior knowledge, we get the students involved in the lesson, get them hooked. We know this, we can't get at rigor unless we have engagement. And so we want to set our students up for that idea of being engaged in the process, very actively learning from the very beginning. We want to make sure that we have a structure that helps them bring what they already know to the lesson at hand. Once we've activated the lesson or we've started that process, we want to think about how we're supporting students in accessing information, whether it's a lecture, reading a text, watching a video. We want to make sure that we are clear with the students about what the expectations are, what they're going to be doing, how they're going to be interacting with that content, and what they're expected to do with that content afterwards. Arming them so that they are, as they're reading or as they're watching a video, they're working their way through the process and again, are set up for success in the next part. The next part from our perspective is either applying what we've already learned or what we're learning to a setting, or processing that information, seeing how this information fits with what we already know, extends what we're learning, and pushes us forward down that path towards mastery. We want to make sure that as we're looking at that, we're giving students multiple opportunities, not just to be experts already, but to process that information with their peers. We know that it's important that as they're processing, students get the chance to organize their thinking, hear other people's perspectives. As they're learning, they aren't content experts, and they don't know exactly what the most important parts are, but as they work together to create that knowledge, it helps strengthen the understanding. Then the last component, or the last part of the learning sequence is closure synthesis. It's important that we give students the opportunity to finally organize their thinking. That synthesis allows them to organize their learning for deeper, longer lasting impact. You'll see in the second column of the matrix a little bit more detail about those rationale and purpose. The third column is potential strategies. This is not an exhaustive list of strategies that we recommend. If you go to your guidebook, the Appendix C has a much larger list of strategies, but this helps you get started in thinking about strategies that help you fit the purpose for that component. We want to make sure that we're choosing strategies that fit our needs, not stop, drop, and do literacy. I don't want to say, oh, I want to do the word wall. Don't do the word wall if it doesn't fit your vocabulary development structure. The importance of the word wall is not putting the words on the wall, but it's the interactions. If your goal is, I want to help my students get to those 24, 25 interactions with words so they can show mastery, then the interactive word wall is a structure that can help you do that. And that's a good reason to choose the word wall. So keep that in mind as you're choosing your strategies. Make sure they fit your purpose. The last column here is to think about this idea of, am I giving a balanced approach to literacy? You know this, when you're reading, when you're talking, when you're writing, you're using different parts of the brain. And we want to make sure that we're giving the students the opportunities to use a whole brain experience as part of the lesson, and doing that throughout the lesson, not just in one part. So you'll notice that we were doing some writing and academic dialogue to activate the lesson, but we were also doing some writing and academic dialogue to end the lesson. And so we want to make sure we're giving students multiple opportunities to process that information. So I'm going to give us time now to take a pause, go back to your double entry organizer, add some thinking to that if you haven't already done so, and then we'll pick up on the next part. So now let's take this framework and apply it to the learning sequence from the overview, from Content Literacy Overview. You go back and look at that Content Literacy tab on the website, you can see that we did some professional reading, gave you the strategy of text codes, margin notes, and then did some key terms that we were reflecting on the essential aspects of content literacy that you used as part of your list, group, and label activity. So let's now look at that learning sequence through that framework and see and talk about a little bit about the purpose behind what we were doing. I'm not going to read you all the way through all of this. We started you with a write and learn activity to activate your thinking about what I already knew about literacy, gave you a little bit of information, and then began to think about what are some of those changes that might be coming up. I think the second component here, the accessing information, was important. We put you into the Foundations Guidebook for the first time, but we were very careful to make sure you knew what you were reading, why you were reading it, what you were going to do with that information when you came out. And we gave you a structure that supported you in being successful in that list, group, label when you did come out. We used text codes and margin notes in this case. Wanted you to begin thinking about this idea of what was important, what were the connections, what were some of the questions you had. Really thinking about what are some of the kinds of notes you put down in the margins, making connections again with your own thinking, research that you already know, or something that you've already done. And then we took you from that experience into the alpha blocks where you identified five key terms. You'll notice that we didn't have you identifying the key terms as you were reading. For us, it was more important that you got the concept down first and then go back and, now that I read it, what were some of the key terms? That gives you an opportunity to kind of reread a second time, skim through it, as opposed to reading initially and where your focus now changes to, I'm looking for the key terms, as opposed to reading holistically, I'm looking for meaning in the reading. So as you went back and found those 5 key terms, you went through a list, group, and label with your team. And then my experience with that list, group, and label is often that the teams will identify what the teacher actions are and student actions are, and then the overlap. And that's very important as we begin thinking about content literacy in the classroom. What is the teacher doing to set the students up to be successful, and what are the students doing to be active learners in that process? So that makes a lot of sense about content literacy as we think about how it's applied in the classroom. And then last but certainly not least, we had you do a quick write. Why and how is content literacy important to student success in my classroom? Again, this always comes back to, we want to make sure whatever you're doing supports content learning and the content that you're responsible for as a teacher in building. That's a writing to learn strategy, and that's an easy one for us to use in this asynchronous virtual experience. You can kind of organize your thinking and share that with us, and we can use that to begin the next day or to have extended conversations with people where it's necessary. We would normally, as we were doing this in a face-to-face setting, couple that with an academic dialogue synthesis so that people were organizing their thinking initially, but then talking about it and getting the perspective of others. Obviously, we couldn't do that in the virtual environment, but that's how we would change or adjust some things if in the virtual environment versus a face-to-face environment. So this framework gives you an idea of why we did what we did and how we came about choosing those strategies. It's a little bit of thinking about being intentional. You'll notice that you had multiple writing to learn, but you also had some academic dialogue, and that was group and label activity, as well as some reading comprehension. It's about balance and giving students the opportunity to experience the content through multiple modalities.